Today we have a legend and I forgot the word I was going to use, but Jeanie Langford. She's our local historian. She knows pretty much everything about the history of Hopewell, and we are thrilled to have her again. This is her second visit here. So, today she's going to talk about the industries of Hopewell and how they're often considered a male world. Women have played an important role in the industries from the DuPont days of the early 20th century and into the present. She will talk about these women and some of the underlying resentment of women in industry. And in case you don't know about Jeanie, she was born in Narrows, Virginia, and has lived in Hopewell, Virginia since the age of 3. She graduated from Hopewell High School and attended the College of William and Mary, where she focused her studies on history. Ms. Langford is employed by the Appomattox Regional Library System, which serves the city of Hopewell and the counties of Prince George and Dinwiddie. She is the assistant librarian and archivist for the Ann K. and Preston H. Leake Local History and Genealogy Room, located in the headquarters building of the Appomattox Regional Library System. Jeanie is certified in museum management, having graduated on March 11, 2013 from the Virginia Museum Association's program. She is now pursuing an advanced certification. So Jeanie is well qualified to do what she does, but she is more knowledgeable than most everyone in town about the history of this city. So, welcome, Jeanie.
Good afternoon, everyone. As always, it is my pleasure to be up here before you. I've been doing this for 24 years at 2 programs every summer, and never repeated one. This program about the women of industry took me in a completely different direction than I planned on going. Let me begin by saying women have been involved in industry, particularly since the turn of century, mostly in clerical work as stenographers, telephone operators, occasionally payroll clerks, and other janitorial work. They often were not allowed to work in production because that was considered a man's world, and there was resentment toward these women. Some of the women in the community felt that these women were there to steal their husbands. The companies often thought these women are just transients. Why should we bother training them? Because as soon as they do find a husband, they're going to leave. Also, it was very difficult for women to find childcare. If you've just moved to Hopewell and you have no family here and you're a widow with young children, who are you going to get to take care of your children? So women were kind of excluded. They were told what to wear. They could be asked to leave work if their sweaters were too tight, if their dress was too short. Excuse me. They could be asked to leave work. They could even be fired for that. Now, things did begin to change in the 1960s with some of the equal employment opportunity laws, women becoming more educated, and they persisted and persevered. There was still resentment because the age-old thing, one man doesn't necessarily want to work for a woman. And there was resentment from other women that these were still home wreckers. So there's been a lot of problems for women in the industry, but things probably since about 2000 have really changed. Some of these women are current, and some of them are pioneers. They all have ties to our community. On the far left, you will see Lori Ingleheart. She is an area manager at DuPont. She's been with DuPont for 15 years and 7 months. She graduated from Ohio State in chemical engineering. She works in the Tyvek team, which some people from Hopewell are employed over at the Spruance plant. She is in charge of environmental health, safety, and the leader of the Tyvek cultural team. She wants everything to be more communicative. She's also involved in the community. She works with the United Women's Way Leadership Council and believes firmly in spending time on the floor, getting to know her employees, and getting to know the processes that they work with. Lauren Cecil is the project controls manager at Advanced 6. She graduated from Michigan State University with a chemical engineering degree. She is responsible for managing, analyzing capital profits across Advanced 6, to work with finance to meet business objectives. She manages a team of 20 professionals, transforming the project control organization and capital management process all across Advanced 6. Stacy McKeague, the lady in the hard hat. Stacy McKeague, I believe, is the first female plant manager in Hopewell. Ebonic has 3 plants on their site. Stacy has managed the North plant since 2010. She graduated from Drexel University with a degree in chemical engineering. She is skilled in process optimization, process engineering, and continuous part of a team that went 10 years. This is unprecedented. 10 years without a lost time accident. She worked in Philadelphia before coming to Hopewell. She supervises 140 people. She has been very involved in our community as a member of the Chamber of Commerce and other organizations. And Ebonic has always been very good about contributing to different projects in the city. She's been involved with that. And they also spend a lot of time going to the schools and sharing things with the children. Next down the line, we have the mother of the supervisors, Stephanie Quallett. She was born in Pennsylvania and graduated in 1946 from Margaret Morrison College in Carnegie Mellon. She was recruited to work as a chemist at DuPont. She had desires to become a physician, but her work at DuPont just engrossed her. She was given the opportunity to work in organic chemistry. Organic chemistry is a bear, trust me. It's hard to understand, and I'm not even going to try. In less than 3 years, she was moved to Wilmington to be one of the leads in the chemistry development process part of DuPont. Ms. Quallett started working with new types of fibers that could be spun at a lower degree and would have amazing properties that things like nylon and rayon don't have. So one day she was mixing up some stuff in the lab, and this strange yellow liquid appeared. Well, the other chemist said, we can't ever use that stuff. All fibers gotta kind of be white. Well, for 9 years she worked with that strange chemical compound, and what it turned out to be was Kevlar. She also worked in developing Nomex, Tyvek, Spandex, and Lycra, and held more than 28 patents. So, as you may be aware, in the 1960s, DuPont built the Tyvek, the Kevlar, the Nomex over on site at the Spruance plant. So when the nylon industry began to collapse, DuPont, thanks to this woman's work, had something to cover that loss of that nylon plant. She has been the subject of children's books, like The Fiber That Stops a Bullet. Kevlar is 5 times stronger than steel. Nomex is fire retardant. It's used in a lot of firemen's clothes and race car suits. Tyvek has many uses, and here lately, one that we would all appreciate is in personal protective equipment, because virtually no germ can go through Tyvek. She visited the DuPont site over the years of the construction, and my husband, who worked at DuPont, I didn't know it at the time until I did this research. I'd always heard him speak of the lady chemist. I never knew her name, but she was always there to answer the phone if they were having problems. She would come down and she would get it fixed. She retired from DuPont in 1986. She had won numerous awards: National Medal of Technology, National Inventors Hall of Fame. But perhaps the most prominent award was the Lavoisier Medal, awarded by DuPont. And to this very day, Stephanie Kwolek is the only woman who ever won that award from DuPont. She stayed retired for a little while, working with college students, mentoring them on their chemistry, but then she got a phone call. It was good old Mother DuPont. And so after she retired, she was hired back as a part-time consultant for DuPont and worked with them until her death in 2014. A remarkable woman. They laughed about her strange yellow concoction, but it saved countless thousands of lives. So has Nomex, so has Tyvek, and Stephanie Kwolek was very, very proud of that and of providing thousands of jobs to the people of our area. This next person, Christiana Hall, her married name will be Worthams, very much surprised me. She was born in Hopewell, the daughter of Robert J. Hall, and lived on Tabb Street. She would have attended what was then called the colored schools, the old Arlington, and for the first 2 years of high school, she would have been at Carter G. Woodson High School. In 1963, some integration of the schools does begin. Instead, Christiana is one of 3 black students that will graduate in the class of 1965. As you can see by the pictures, she was a member of the basketball team, member of the softball team, National Honor Society, Science Club. She was extremely bright, and against probably which was some resentment at the time of black students being at the high school, she persevered, and she graduated number 5 in the class of 1965 with a 96.04 average. She was just a few tenths from being the valedictorian of the class of 1965. After school, high school, she went on to attend the College of Mary Washington. Upon graduation, she had a major in chemistry and a minor in education. She taught school for 6 years in Northern Virginia, and then decided that she wanted to go back to school. She went back for a master's degree in chemistry from Southern University in Baton Rouge. She married her husband, Quentin Worthams, in 1975 and moved to California because she had been offered a position with Aerojet. I knew nothing about Aerojet, had never heard of Aerojet. But Aerojet is extremely important. What they do is rocket engines and propellants for the Defense Department for missiles and other weapons. It's a small company. They only today employ about 5,000 people, but they can compete with Lockheed and Boeing, and they're in the process of developing the rocket engine that will go to Mars. In 1977, Aerojet had a small little problem. Not quite as bad as Keep Home, but pretty darn close. Somebody at OSHA found out that there was contaminants in the water and possibly cancer-causing agents. And they were going to revoke Aerojet's license to treat water and intake and outtake water. So they put Miss Hall Worthams on this problem. And Aerojet credits her with being the one to enable them to keep their license and to stay in business. It could have been a very big catastrophe if they'd had to close, because they were building all the engines for the space shuttles. They were building and making propellants for the national defense. So you would have been hurting NASA and the military if this company had had to shut down. In 1986, Aerojet built a facility in Culpeper, which is still in existence. She asked to transfer to Culpeper to be closer to her aging father. So she stayed at Aerojet until she retired in 2007. And she is currently alive and well and residing in Spotsylvania. She was a prominent member of the National Association of University Women. That was an organization founded in the 1880s by African American women to promote education and women's rights in the community. She was the president of it at one point in the Southwestern District, and she is still currently involved with that. And they spend a lot of time mentoring children, finding educational opportunities for women. So she has been very involved in the community. She did have to face a whole lot of adversity coming up in the South during the times of segregation, but she persevered and became a very, someone that I am proud to know about that I had never known about. And to my immediate right is the Queen, Mary Lennox Morris, who in the early part of the 20th century broke down all the barriers. Miss Morris was born in 1875. Her father had run away to join the Confederate Army as a 17-year-old, and by the time he surrendered at Appomattox, he was a captain. He became a prominent attorney and judge. At 8 years of age, Miss Mary Morris was walked by the cotton mill by her mammy, and she was horrified by what she saw. People covered in cotton lint, and some of them not even much older than she was. She thought they were creatures from somewhere else. As she grew older, she remembered this. And then she realized those weren't creatures. Those were human beings that deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. She decided at that point, sometime in high school, that she would devote her life to personnel service. She went to Ward Belmont Girls' School in Nashville until the age of 16. At that point, her father, who was very strict, decided that maybe Miss Mary was a little bit too interested in parties and boys. So he sent her to Peabody Normal School in Nashville, a very, very prominent girls' school. Her father believed in education, and all her brothers, well, her two brothers and her sister, were all extremely well educated. After she graduated from Peabody Normal School, she went to France, and this is going to become very important later on. She learned French. She also got a job as the auditor at an all-girls school. So she was in charge of managing the money and different other things. She stayed in France until 1914. She was hired by the Board of Recreation in Pennsylvania to supervise 150 teachers. Well, 10 principals in that school district got a little upset. They said she had gotten that job by clout, and that was a man's job, not a woman's job, and that she hadn't taken the civil service test. Well, the little girl from Tennessee said, okay, let's all take the test. They took the test. 10 people failed, 1 person passed. That would be Miss Mary. She held that job for about 2 years. Then she was called by Sun Shipbuilding Company in Pennsylvania. They were planning to bring more women into the shipyard for several reasons. Number one, World War I was creating a manpower shortage. And number two, the pandemic was wreaking havoc. She decided that she would like to do this, that she could really help this company out. She received a telephone call that there was a huge problem at the shipyard. The flu pandemic was wreaking havoc. So she called the sister of the president of the company, and between the two of them, they got together a team of 100 nurses and 40 doctors to handle the situation and living conditions at that shipyard. She was known as the angel of the shipyard because she always wore white. Can you imagine walking around in a white dress in the shipyard? Always wore white and went around doing great good, making sure that her workers were well cared for. After that was over, she went back to Tennessee for a little while. And then there came another phone call. Miss Mary arrived in Hopewell in 1921 to work for Hope 2Bs. She had only a steamer trunk and the clothes on her back. And what she saw here just tore her nerves up. She saw a town that basically had been ravaged by war. Abandoned buildings, abandoned houses, a population of only about 1,200 people. How was she going to get workers when she couldn't even hardly find a place to live? Well, she did manage to find one decent home in her mind, and that was at the end of North 2nd Street, close to where Riverview Convalescent Center sits. So she took that little house, and that remained her home until she passed away in 1964. She immediately started studying wages as what would be fair for 2Bs to pay people. She established the cafeteria, opened the dormitories, and launched recreational programs for the people at work. But she had to find 1,000 high school graduates. Well, she wasn't going to find them in Hopewell because they only had 25 kids in high school. So she began reaching out in newspapers, different other publications. So she recruited over 1,000 people to be at work in only a few months. That means processing applications sometimes by the hundreds for both men and women, because 2Bs had separate sections. There was the processing part and then the knitting and dyeing. And 2Bs felt that women had a finer eye for detail, so that's why they were better in knitting and dyeing. So part of the deal was that 20 American girls from 2Bs were going to go to Belgium, and 24 Belgian girls were going to come here. Now, of course, these Belgian girls speak French, so that's where Miss Mary's French abilities come in. So the 24 girls come over. Miss Mary had set up a special dormitory for them so that they would be able to communicate with her, that she could be around 24/7 to help with them. She even went the extra mile to find a French chef to have their native food for them so that they would not have to be eating American food all the time. This is part of her personnel in working with people. When it came time to take the girls up to New York to return and to pick up her 20 girls, she was invited to the Belgian ambassador's home with the girls. Well, they have a lovely dinner, and lovely tea, and then the Belgian ambassador's wife says to Miss Mary, "Let's go sneak over here so the girls won't see us and we'll have a cigarette." So they did. So the next day, Miss Mary goes to get her 24 Belgian girls to send home, and she walks into the Lafayette Hotel in New York to get them, and much to her shock and then amusement, all 24 of them were smoking cigarettes. She was greatly accredited with taking such good care of these girls by the Belgian government, and they even gave her a medal for having done so much for these girls while they were here. Miss Mary, by the height of 2Bs, is responsible for over 4,000 men and women. She was known as their mother confessor and the Jill of all trades. Employees could come to her for anything, and she saw to it that their concerns were addressed. Now, one of the most touching stories about Miss Mary was she was very involved, and she would visit sick employees or wives who had delivered babies at home. She went to a home to visit, and there was a mother who had just had a set of twins. Of course, the husband is still working because they didn't give maternity leave back then. So that woman who had just delivered twins was home with 5 other small children. When Miss Mary walked in, the older children were doing their best to help care for the 2 infants, and the youngest, the 2-year-old, was taking care of making sure his mother had water and food. Well, Miss Mary was very disturbed by this. She stayed for several hours and helped the children get themselves together. She immediately marched herself back to 2Bs and went to the site manager and told him, "This is a problem. We are not caring for our people. We need at least one visiting nurse. Well, 2Bs immediately hired not one, not two, but 3 visiting nurses to care for their employees and their families. That is very touching. This is how much that woman cared about the people who worked for her and with her. Miss Mary was very active with some problem you don't think of in the 20s and the 30s. But yes, there were unwed mothers, some of them working at the plant. Miss Mary made it a special project to help these women. And she was very proud to say that over 90% of them did extremely well and were able to keep their jobs. Miss Mary was very active in the community. She organized the Appomattox Rural Garden Club, the Business and Professional Women's Club. She was the secretary for the Instructive Visiting Nurses Association for 10 years. That's why there was such good health care for these families during that time. Miss Mary retired in 1946 from 2Bs. But one of the proud things she used to like to tell about was Rusty. Rusty was a red Cocker Spaniel. Now, Miss Mary and Miss Elise, her sister, saw something about the Canine Corps needing small dogs. Now, Rusty was right age, just about 1.5 years old, so they decided that they would give Rusty to the Canine Corps. Rusty went into service. He had to learn how to crawl like a soldier, act like a soldier. Rusty was honorably discharged after 3 years of service and returned to live out the remainder of his days with Miss Mary and her sister. I don't know exactly what Rusty did. Some of the dogs were involved, the small dogs, in security around plants. Some of them were used around the coastline to watch for German and Japanese submarines. But whatever Rusty did, he was honorably discharged and returned. At Miss Mary's retirement in 1946, some very unique to me things happened. Number one, how often do you see company bigwigs come all the way from New York to someone's retirement party? They not only came, but they spoke, and they piled lavish gifts on Miss Mary for her service. The employees of 2Bs bought her a great big wing chair, and there was a book that almost every single, at that point there were 650 employees, almost every single employee signed and had written little notes about how much she had cared for them and how much she had done for their families. How many of you are fans of the original Star Trek? Okay. How many of you remember the one where they go back in time and Captain Kirk meets Edith Keeler? Well, if Jean Roddenberry had known Miss Mary, she would have been the model for Edith Keeler. But fortunately, she didn't have to meet Kirk, Bones, and Spock and die. Miss Mary remained active in the community after her retirement. She loved her beautiful garden that was in back of her home. She loved roses and was very proud of an exotic lily from India that 2Bs had given her. She entered flower shows quite often and won a lot. Mark told me that when he was young that he could go back and cut Miss Mary's garden with a push mower, and it would take him 2 days, and she'd give him $5. I would have been honored to have known this woman, but unfortunately I didn't ever get to meet her. But the good that she did for this community, the way that I believe, I know there are all the new laws and privacy, but this is a prime example of how an industry should work. Miss Mary's motto was fair play is the key to good personnel relations. She was very committed to all her employees and their families. Even after her retirement, they would go visit her and tell her and ask for her advice on things that were going on. Probably one of the best loved women that's ever been around Hopewell. So what you will see is that all these women share perseverance, persistence, and tenacity. But they also share some other things. They share devotion to their employees. They share devotion and commitment to their communities. And they have a deep, deep understanding of what is fair and how things should be. And like I said, they took me in a completely different direction than I intended, but I am so glad that I've had the honor to sort of meet these people and get to know them. And thank you all so very much. And I'll be available for questions or comments. And I have enjoyed this program very much, and I hope they have touched you as much as they have touched me. Yes, sir.
Jeanie, just a funny aside, Brother Mark and I were trying to move to Hopewell in 1960. They moved into 203 actually, this married into 201.
And when we pulled into the driveway after a 7-hour drive, we're in the middle of July, toward the end of July, we were beat. So we all got out of the car and we're sitting there looking at our house. Next thing you know, this little old lady comes through a hole in the hedge and walks up and says, who might you people be? And my dad said, well, he introduced himself and my mother, and these are our children. She said, well, my name's Miss Mary Lennox Morris, and I'll be your new neighbor. And he said, nice to meet you, Miss Morris. And she looked around a little bit and she said, where are you folks from? And Dad said, well, we just moved out from Pennsylvania. She goes, damn Yankees. And I walked back through the hole in the hedge. I looked over and Dad said, Dad, what's a damn Yankee? I was only about 8.5 years old. That's the first time I'd ever heard the term.
That reminds me of something that happened at the shipyard with Miss Mary. She was in charge of the hiring, and she described it in her book, which she never got to publish, but she said this young Yankee boy came in and asked to see the boss. And Miss Mary said, well, if you're looking to hire on, that'd be me. And the Yankee boy said, well, I ain't working for no woman, and left. So he didn't work.
I'd like to add another lady to the far right, and her name is, hi.
Oh, there you are. I was in the ozone somewhere.
Her name is Erin King, and she is the CEO and president of Advent 6. And she doesn't live in the local area, but I need a little story to tell you. There's a cannon up at the traffic circle on 15th Street, and the wheels kept rotting. And the VFW got tired of having to pay to have a wheelwright rebuild wooden wheels. So I was with him at VMI and discovered that there's something called cast aluminum wheels, but they're a little pricey. So thanks to a member of this organization, Strawberry, who worked at Advent 6, he says, I think I can get him to redo the canon. So we approached Advent 6 leadership about paying for the wheels. Well, Advent 6 took care of everything, including the shipment from the Midwest, Kentucky, I think it was. And for a long time, I thought Advent 6 paid for it. Guess what? She didn't. Advent 6 did not pay for it. Aaron Kane personally wrote the check to pay for the complete restoration of that canon. So I just wanted to add another name.
Thank you. And I do have one other quick story to tell you about Miss Mary. Miss Mary evidently had multiple pets, but over the years she lived a very long time. But there was one other little dog that she had whose name was Twitchy. Twitchy was a fox terrier. But what made Twitchy so special to Miss Mary was that Twitchy's father, Chris, had been a present from the Prince of Wales to his goddaughter, the Duchess of Somerset. And so we had royalty here. But these women are very special. There are more out there.
We live right next to Miss Mary. And one story, it's kind of, but it's true. That dog that's in the picture there is Duchess.
That's Duchess?
Duchess. And she was an AK registered beagle. And we used to keep her in a pen behind the house. And Miss Mary thought she was hers. She would come over all the time and take our dog out of the pen and take it home. And we would go looking for a Duchess, and we knew where to go because Miss Mary would, and she would tell us, boys, that's my dog. So anyway, we got her one day and took her back over to the pen. Well, my dad's in the bathroom, sitting on the john, and the door opens up to the bathroom, and Miss Mary's standing there. And she walks in and sits down on the tub, looking at her. And she says, Mr. Marvin, you have to do something about these boys stealing my dog. And Daddy says, Miss Mary, that's the boy's dog. And she said, Mister, I shouldn't be in here, should I, Mr. Marvin? He said, no, Miss Mary, you go on outside to the living room and I'll be out. And so she went out and sat down, and as soon as he walks out there, she says, you need to tell them boys to stop taking my dog.
Yes, unfortunately, in her later years, Miss Mary did get rather senile. She died in Eastern State. She had really no kin. Her brothers and sisters were all dead. She did have some nieces and nephews who lived in Louisiana. They took no interest in the little house, so eventually it would fall into disrepair and be bulldozed. But she definitely very special.
I just wanted to add too that she had in her backyard, not in the yard itself, but off in a little patch in the woods, a real pet cemetery. Every pet that she ever owned was buried in this pet cemetery, which is now probably underneath the present nursing home. And we used to tend it for her. As the older she got and she couldn't do it for herself, Mark would cut her grass and we'd tend to the pet cemetery. We never knew what happened to her. She just disappeared one day, and we found out much later that she spent her last year or so in the Eastern State Hospital. Her land was sat empty for 3 years. The house was bulldozed, and then they built those apartments down there. And I believe they were bulldozed probably maybe 20 years ago. And of course, the house that we lived in was bulldozed as well. And then they built the nursing center there. I think that was in the early 2000s.
Yes. Any more? All right, well, thank you all so much, and I really hope you all have enjoyed this program as much as I have. And thank you for coming.